Well, good morning. If you fell asleep last night, you've missed a lot of things that have happened. We're still going to do World Cup content. We're just going to wrap up after the round of 16 is complete. But late last night, Project 8 started to trend. And if you're not familiar with what that is, Project 8 is a domestic league for Canada, which is headed up by Diana Matheson and co. Diana Matheson and co. So her, Thomas Gilbert, Georgia Simmerling, among others, Sean Small, and more. If you want to go look, we'll post a link in the description so you guys can take a look at that. Project 8 is a project to start a domestic league by 2025. Now, there's a few things that are of note that you need to be aware of here. First one being, this isn't part of a CSA deal. Now, there's a nice thread on Twitter from wsoccer, who was one who was, they weren't leaking information, but they were giving hints. So I was very much paying attention to what the account was saying. But it's an 8-team league. So far, the 2 teams that are confirmed in this league are Foothills down in Calgary, as well as the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, you'll see some names there, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we reach the end to it, some of my thoughts on that as well. But right now, it's an 8-team league, and what they're looking for is how to invest. There are things that we have to establish. So this isn't the women's CPL. This isn't the Women's Canadian Premier League. That has to be established. The CSB or the CSA, so Canada Soccer Business or the Canada Soccer Association, they haven't formally endorsed this. This has just come out as this is a thing that is happening. And of note, I think only Calvary, that football club, has come out to endorse anything, as well as the Whitecaps, because from proximity, those are the clubs that are the closest, but also from proximity, those are the clubs who will be most involved. So it is very interesting to kind of go through some of the details. Buy-in. They're looking for individuals, groups with $8 to $10 million to help buy in and get established rosters and established franchises here. This does start to look a little bit like that NWSL early MLS 5, where the buy-in is easy here. We're trying to find what we're trying to do, and all the great details here are going to be in this thread, which I'll post a link to, as well as the Project 8. But 8 to 10 is sitting there, and what that does essentially does allow different teams who want to move up to do so. Right? We saw a lot in League One Ontario's and League Ones across Canada. There are some teams who really started to push up. Simcoe County, TSS in Ontario and BC are just 2 teams who started to invest a little bit more, whether that was from getting fan input, whether that was getting investors. We saw Simcoe County and TSS getting lots of current and former Canadian players to buy in, and I was always wondering myself, what could this mean on the men's side, but also on the women's side? So 8 to 10 and 6 teams, it does open the door for some possibilities. Now, because it's not part of the CSB as of now, or hasn't been endorsed by them, here are the things that you have to keep in mind. It means you're not getting additional funding from the CSA or the CSB. Everything is on their own. Now, on the thread from wsoccer, it does paint the picture that essentially the CSA wasn't impressed by this, so this team went at it alone. And if that's the case, well, even if this was endorsed by the CSA, a league which could be seen as a top league in Canada in 2 years, they're giving themselves 2 years to establish what the 6 teams that they have and get more sponsors as well. Currently, for sponsors, they already have, and that's very important to note, they already have Air Canada and CIBC as founding sponsors, which I think will definitely help with travel as well as financing. CIBC being a partner and that's an interesting partner. CIBC just invested money into the Canadian soccer business for the national teams. So the fact that they're now there on the side, also supporting a startup league, does confirm a thing that many Canadian WOSO fans have thought, which is there is investment available. It's just they need something to invest in. And so that is important. So I'll be putting links to those two things in the description. I like the thread that wsoccer has. Some of the other notes, assuming maybe with Amy Walsh with her role at Montreal, maybe CF Montreal will be joining, whether TFC comes, and then other 6 clubs. I mean, again, you're looking for 8 to 10 is the buy-in, because that's what they need to properly have the infrastructure. And I get why the number is that high. You want to make sure, A, for the standards that they have for this league, that people are meeting them from the get-go. B, you want to make sure that if you have that much to buy in, you're buying in not only for that team, but also keeping it financially viable and stable moving forward. And then on the advisory board, when you have teams and players like a Christine Sinclair sitting on the advisory board, someone who has experience playing and has seen a lot of things, it does definitely, you can't understand why the number is high. Now, outside of that, I think, for me, my personal thoughts, I've always thought if they were going to have a domestic league, it would have to be outside of the CSA, because you'd want to be able to push funding specifically for them. One of my models that I do enjoy watching is looking at the Australian Soccer Association, and how their team has been able to find specific funding and partners. Their advisory board and their business board have been able to find specific sponsors for both the Socceroos and the Matildas, right? The Matildas have a Commonwealth Bank, who they have a 5-year partnership with. It was a 4-year partnership. The Socceroos have Subway. And so you have that specific funding for that. With CSB, with the questions that we do have with it, it has done some good. We can be angry about maybe how the funding goes, but then we have to also look at the reality where they've done their best to keep things like the CPL afloat over years. So with that being the case, I always thought seeing it outside of that gives it the best chance to maybe succeed, as well as since it's outside of that, it makes the barriers to entry simply just financial, which, I mean, I know. Who has $8 million lying around? I certainly don't. But maybe with a newer team, with a newer league outside of that, maybe the barriers to entry, whether from teams, from sponsors, aren't as limited, say, as going through the CSB or the CSA. It's exciting. It really is exciting. That being said, though, I do also have a bit of a tinge of concern. It's not with the league itself. You have the league. If you followed anything with women's soccer in Canada recently, you know about the abuse that's happened at the Whitecaps, and then furthermore with all the abuse that's happened in the NWSL, and with Christine Sinclair at the end, thanking Mary Paulson for their time. A lot of people didn't like the sound of that, and to me, it's always in the back of my head, and I'm thinking about it from a standpoint of, yes, that is there, but we also have to be a little bit, we can't repeat the same mistakes that have happened. This league offers an opportunity now to be able to learn from the lessons in the past, creating the best environment for young players, not only to develop as players, but to develop as individuals. And I found, again, that Whitecaps are there, then Sinclair on the board. It is interesting, but it's still in the back of my head, and I'm feeling about that. But to that league, I'm sure they will take that, and I hope they take that into account, because we will all be watching, not only to see the success of the league, but to make sure that ethically it is run in a way that does not put their players in harm's way, nor even anyone in any position. I think Canadians and everyone in the world should hold this league to the highest standard, like every league. Because if we fail to learn from history, we're bound to repeat it. But a domestic league is coming. If you're excited about this, let me know in the comments. Where would you like to see a team? I mean, I know I've seen lots of lists going through, but right now we have a team in Calgary, a team in Vancouver, and 6 more slots available. They're not limiting, but they want to have a minimum of 6 to start. 6 more teams to start. Where would you like to see those teams? And how do you feel about this? Do you think it's good that they went outside of the CSB and the CSA? Or do you think it becomes more problematic for them, guys? It's a big conversation to have, but let me know in the comments below. And until then, guys, enjoy the day, and bye-bye for now.